I grew up on a small family farm about 40 minutes outside Pietermaritzburg. I'm telling this now because, and I know how this sounds, what happened that night never officially happened. The police dismissed it. My father refused to talk about it again. But I know what I saw, and every time the wind rattles our wire fence, I feel that same cold knot in my stomach. Our house sat alone at the end of a dirt road, surrounded by maize fields and thorn trees. At night, the only sounds were insects and the occasional distant bark of a dog. It was the kind of quiet that made you feel safe, but also made you notice when something wasn't right. My dad used to say, if someone pulls up that road, they're either lost or they're looking for trouble. We had one neighbor, an old farmer named David's, 5 kilometers away. One evening in June, just before sunset, I noticed the farm gate was unlatched and slightly open. Not broken. Not forced. Just open. The thing is, our gate was heavy. You couldn't accidentally leave it like that. You had to lift the pin, drag it open, drop it back into place. When I told my dad, he said maybe he'd forgotten, but his eyes lingered on the dust by the gate. There were footprints. Bare ones. Adult-sized. And it was winter. That night, the air felt heavier than usual. Like the atmosphere itself was holding its breath. My dad told me to lock all the doors and windows. He switched off the inside lights and stood in the dark kitchen, staring out across the fields. Around 11 p.m., we heard the first tap. Slow. On the lounge window. Not knocking. Tapping. With a fingernail. My mother covered her mouth. My dad motioned for us to stay still. After a long silence, he crept forward, crawled on the floor, and peeked from under the curtain. I'll never forget how he froze. He didn't speak. He just stared. Then, without looking away from the window, he moved his hand behind him, signaling us to stay down. When he finally backed away, he whispered, "He's standing right there." Smiling. My dad reached for the shotgun above the fireplace. Before he could load it, we heard scraping around the back of the house. Footsteps dragging through gravel. Just one pair. Slow. Measured. Coming toward the back door. We stayed silent. Then we heard breathing. Deep, calm, controlled. Whoever it was pressed their face against the back door. And then a whisper came through the wood. One word. Open. Not shouted. Not aggressive. Just commanding. Like the voice of someone who already believed they belonged inside. My father racked the shotgun and shouted that he would shoot. There was no response. Just silence. Then slow footsteps moving away into the field. We didn't sleep for the rest of the night. My father stayed by the window with the shotgun resting on his lap until dawn. When the sun came up, we checked outside. Footprints circled the house. Not running. Not chaotic. Just walking. Observing. At the kitchen window, we saw skin oil smudged across the glass, as if someone had pressed their cheek against it to look in. And near the back door in the dirt, was a neat pile of nails. Old, rusted ones sharpened at the tips. Like someone was preparing traps. We called the police. They arrived hours later. They looked around, made jokes about bush ghosts, and drove away without taking notes. 3 months after that, old Mr. Davids, the neighbor, vanished from his farmhouse. No forced entry. No signs of a struggle. Just gone. His front gate was found open. Years passed. My father never spoke of it again. When he died, we sold the farm. But last winter, while packing his things, I found an envelope hidden in his bedside drawer. Inside was a trail cam photo, grainy, black and white, aimed at our farm gate. The gate was open, and there was a man standing there, barefoot, facing the camera. He was smiling. On the back, in my father's handwriting, were 2 words, "He's back." And that's why I'm telling this story now. Because gates don't open themselves. And sometimes, when I'm driving alone at night and I see a figure on the roadside, just beyond the reach of the headlights, I don't look too long. Because I'm afraid, if I slow down, he'll start walking toward me. Story 2. I used to drive long-haul freight for a small logistics company that ran across the Northern Cape, mostly night routes. People assume it's relaxing, empty highways, nothing but stars, but out there, silence is its own kind of presence. And once you've heard a scream carried on desert wind, you never hear silence the same way again. It was about 2 years ago. I'd been on the road for 10 hours straight and pulled into one of those old roadside rest stops. Just a gravel lot, a single flickering light pole, and a bathroom made of chipped brick. No cars. No signs of life. Just my headlights cutting across the dust. As I parked, I saw a small white sedan on the far end of the lot. Driver's side door wide open. Headlights off. No one inside. Now, abandoned cars aren't unusual out there, people break down and hitch rides all the time, but they don't leave the door hanging open like they stepped out mid-conversation. I climbed down from the cab and immediately I felt it, this wrongness. Like the air was heavy. Like the world was holding a breath I couldn't hear. The bathroom door was propped open by a rock. Dim light inside. I almost called out, but something in my gut told me not to announce myself. Instead, I walked quietly around the back of the building. That's when I heard it. Not crying. Not yelling. Muffled. Pleading. Someone was whispering please, over and over. Desperate. Like a prayer. I froze. My instinct said run. But I also knew if someone was being hurt and I left, I might hear about their body found in a ditch on the morning news. So I stepped closer, keeping low. The voice went silent. The desert went absolutely still. Then, bare feet. Running. Fast. Directly toward me. I saw him, just a silhouette, a man sprinting, arms pumping, head lowered. He wasn't running away from something. He was running toward me. And what terrified me most wasn't his speed, it was his absolute silence. No heavy breathing. No panic. Like he'd done this before. I didn't think. I bolted to my cab, slammed the door and hit the locks. He reached me just as I got it closed, his hand slapped the glass. Not punching. Just pressing flat. Testing. His face came into the light. He was smiling. Not wide. Not crazed. A tiny controlled smile. Like he was curious how I would react. He leaned his forehead against the window. I'll never forget his eyes. Completely calm. Like I was already his. Then he pointed. Slowly. Not at me. At my passenger side mirror. At first I didn't understand until I looked. There was someone else crouched by my fuel tank. A second man. I hadn't heard him. He must have approached while I was focused on the first one. I don't remember putting the truck in gear. I just remember tires spinning in the gravel, my hands shaking so hard I could barely keep the wheel straight. As I pulled away, someone slapped the side of my trailer. Once. Twice. Slow and rhythmic. I drove until sunrise. When I reported it, the officer only asked me one question. Did you get a license plate from the white sedan? I said no. He wrote nothing down. A month later, another trucker from our company disappeared on that same stretch of road. His rig was found idling in neutral. Driver's door open. No sign of him. They called it an abduction. But I know what it was. They weren't abducting drivers at that rest stop. They were hunting. And the worst part is, I think I was supposed to be next. When I pass that spot now, I never stop. Sometimes, even if I'm just driving past, I see dust swirling beside the old bathroom. Like someone just stepped out of view. Waiting for my brake lights. Waiting for me to open the door. Story 3. This is my official account. I understand I am speaking under oath. My name is Ryan Cole. I live at 92 Ridgeview. The reason I called emergency services is because my neighbor, Mr. Graham, walked into my house without permission, sat down at my kitchen table, and told me that someone had been living inside his walls. I want to be clear, Mr. Graham wasn't drunk. He wasn't high. He wasn't confused. He was terrified. I'd known him for 5 years. Retired school principal. Widower. Quiet. Always waved, kept to himself. At around 9:15 that night, I heard my back door open. I thought it was my wife coming in from the garage. Instead, I found Mr. Graham sitting there in the dark. Both hands flat on the table. Eyes fixed straight ahead. Breathing shallow. He said very calmly, "Please don't turn on the lights." He doesn't like when the lights change. I told him he needed to leave or I'd call the police. He said, "They won't find him. They searched my place 3 times. He only comes out when I'm alone." His voice, God, the way he said it, there wasn't any doubt. He believed it. I reached for my phone. That's when I heard it, through my kitchen wall. A faint, dragging sound. Like fingertips sliding slowly across insulation. Not scratching. Guiding themselves. Feeling for movement. I dropped my phone. Mr. Graham locked his eyes on mine and whispered, "He knows I left. He's probably already in your attic." I told him to stop. That this was insane. But while I was talking, I heard my ceiling creak. Just once. Like someone shifting weight on a beam. My first instinct was to protect my family. I ran to the hallway to check my son's room. His door was closed. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. Then another sound. Not above. Inside the ventilation duct. A slow metallic thud. Then another. Like someone was using their elbows to drag themselves forward in a tight space. Mr. Graham stood up suddenly. He said, "He's moving fast now. He knows you can hear him." I called 911. I told them someone had broken in. While I was on the line, the operator asked if I could confirm the intruder's location. Before I could answer, I heard breathing coming through the vent. Not labored. Not aggressive. Steady. Measured. Like whoever it was had been doing this for a very, very long time. My son opened his bedroom door and asked what was happening. I told him to stay where he was. Mr. Graham shouted, "Don't move," but it was too late. The vent above my son's room made a sound. A sharp, forceful impact. Like a knee driven hard into it from the inside. The screws popped out. The grate shifted. Then the breathing stopped. We didn't wait. We ran out the front door and didn't look back. When officers arrived, they searched the entire house. Attic. Crawl spaces. Walls. They found nothing. But in the duct above my son's room, they recovered something lodged deep inside. A piece of denim fabric. Torn. Worn thin at the knees. As if someone had been crawling through those vents for a long, long time. They said it was probably an animal. But animals don't wear jeans. And they definitely don't whisper your name through the walls in the middle of the night. Story 4. I used to work search and rescue for a rural county that barely had cell service and ran on a fraction of the funding it needed. Most of our calls were hikers gone off trail or kids who fell into rivers. But nothing stuck with me like the call we got on a Wednesday in early October, right as the sun was going down. A man had reported hearing screams coming from the old Ketterling property, an abandoned family farm 20 miles from the nearest paved road. The place had been empty since the early 90s after a fire killed most of the family. 2 daughters were never found. Over the years, people broke in, partied, left garbage, but nobody stuck around long. Locals said the woods around it felt wrong. I never cared about ghost stories. I wish I still didn't. We drove in with 2 trucks, me and my partner Travis in the lead. It was silent except for gravel crackling under the tires. The tree line leaned over the road like it was closing behind us. No wind. No birds. Just stillness. When we got to the clearing, something was already off. The grass was flattened in wide tracks like something had been dragged repeatedly toward the barn. The windows in the farmhouse were boarded, except one on the second floor where a curtain was moving. But there was no breeze. We announced ourselves, lights on, radios crackling with static. We heard it again, a scream. But it didn't sound like a scream you'd expect from someone in immediate pain. It sounded like someone trying to sound like a person in pain. Like a recording being played wrong. We moved toward the barn. The doors were half open. The smell hit us before the light did, metallic, earthy like wet copper. My flashlight beam caught scratch marks on the wood. Human fingernail marks, deep and splintered. Travis tried the radio. Nothing. Inside, hay was scattered everywhere, but there were impressions in it. Not footprints, body prints. Knees, elbows, and handprints dragged forward like someone crawling over and over again in circles. In the corner was an old tape recorder connected to a wire running up into the rafters. It clicked. And that scream played again. I can't describe the feeling that sank into me right then. It wasn't fear. It was realization. This wasn't a rescue. This was a lure. Travis spotted something hanging from the rafters. A bag, maybe burlap. He pulled it down. It was heavy. What? When he opened it, the smell doubled. Inside were clothes. All children's sizes. Torn, stained. The tape clicked to a stop. Then, from deep in the rafters above the light's reach, we heard breathing. Slow. What? Like someone trying not to be heard. I said we needed to leave. No. Travis raised his flashlight. For a second I wish he hadn't. There was a figure up there. Wedged in the beams, limbs bent wrong, head cocked too far to one side. Eyes reflecting our light. But it wasn't looking at us. It was looking past us, toward the open barn doors. We turned. Something was crawling into the barn from outside. Pale. Silent. Moving with its elbows. Long hair dragging in the dirt. We ran. I don't remember deciding to. My feet just moved. We reached the trucks and didn't stop until we hit pavement again. Radio came back the moment we crossed the tree line. Sheriff's deputies went back at dawn. They found the tape recorder, the bag, the tracks. But no farmhouse. No barn. No buildings at all. Just a clearing. And in the middle of it, fresh handprints in the dirt, leading toward the woods. I don't work search and rescue anymore. But sometimes late at night I hear that scream play in my head. Not the scream itself, but the click right before it starts. Like something waiting to be pressed play again. Would you like another story in this style but involving law enforcement breaching a property after a 911 call, with a shootout? Or maybe a trucker who picks up a roadside victim that shouldn't exist? Story 5. I've worked night security for 14 years. Hospitals, shopping centers, even a museum once. People assume the scariest thing about this job is catching criminals. They're wrong. It's catching things you can't logically explain, then realizing they're not just in your head. 3 years ago, I took a position at a distribution warehouse outside of town. Massive place, 500,000 square feet of shelving, conveyor systems, forklifts, and lights that buzzed like flies in a jar. I was the only guard on nights. My job was to patrol every 2 hours, log activity, and watch the monitors in between. The company had recently installed a new camera system. Every aisle, every loading dock, even the stairwells were monitored. I had 64 feeds in front of me at all times. And I swear to you, those cameras saw things I couldn't see with my own eyes. It started my third night. At 2:17 a.m., camera 48, aisle G14, captured a person walking slowly between the shelves. No reflective vest, no ID. Just walking. I radioed in as protocol demanded. No one answered. I checked the employee list. 0 night staff scheduled. I zoomed the feed. The figure stopped, turned, looked straight into the camera. Their face wasn't clear, like the camera struggled to hold focus. But I could tell the eyes were open too wide, like they didn't blink. I grabbed my flashlight and went out there. As I stepped into G14, I remember how loud my footsteps sounded. The shelves towered above me, claustrophobic. I swept my light through the aisle. Nothing. But the air was colder there. Noticeably. I returned to the control room and replayed the footage. The figure had disappeared at the moment I entered the aisle. Not walked away. Not hidden. Just vanished from one frame to the next. The next night it got worse. 3:04 a.m. camera 22. A door at the far end of the maintenance corridor opened on its own. I saw a shadow stretch across the floor. Long. Like someone was standing just out of frame. But when the door closed again, the shadow remained, as if the figure was still there, even though the door had shut behind it. I checked the corridor. Nothing but the door slowly swinging. By the 5th night I stopped patrolling. I just sat and watched, hoping the sun would rise faster. But the camera feeds didn't care about my fear. One feed showed movement in the office upstairs. Papers shuffling across the desk. A chair rolling backward. Another camera caught the motion sensor lights triggering in the packaging section, one after the other, like someone was walking under each one in a perfectly straight line. Then, it got personal. The audio monitor crackled on. I hadn't touched it. And through the static I heard breathing. Slow. Guttural. Like someone had their mouth almost against the microphone. The audio was coming from inside the control room. My skin went numb. I didn't breathe. I just turned my head. The door behind me was still closed. The breathing continued. Then a whisper. Right beside my ear. Clear as if someone was leaning over me. I've been here longer than you. I stood up so fast my chair fell backward. Every monitor went black at the same time. Dead silent. Then one camera turned on by itself. Camera 1 right above the control door. In that grainy black and white feed I saw myself. Not in the chair. Standing. Just as I was. Except, there was someone standing directly behind me on the screen. A face right over my shoulder. Pale. Eyes reflecting white. I didn't see it in real life. Only on the monitor. It lifted its hand on the screen. And touched my shoulder. I felt the pressure, cold, real, as the camera feed cut to static. I screamed. I don't remember doing it, but my throat was raw for 2 days. When maintenance came in at 6 a.m., the control room camera cable had been ripped out from inside the sealed wall. They told me the system must have malfunctioned. I handed in my badge. There were no ghosts. No intruders. Nothing they could register on the logs. But every now and then when I close my eyes, I hear that whisper again. Not angry. Not threatening. Just patient. I've been here longer than you. And I have the sinking feeling, it's still watching for who comes next.